Alrighty, hello everybody and welcome to today's Edulastic 101 training. My name is Jan Moody and I'm excited to be your host today and excited to be here with all of you. I am joined today by two of my Edulastic colleagues. Sean Kendall is on the line and he'll be giving the heart of today's training. He's a customer success manager here and he knows Edulastic really, really well, so we're excited for his presentation. Also on the line is my colleague Ileana Betancourt, and she'll be helping monitor the chat and monitor the Q&A bubble and helping make sure that everybody has their questions answered today. So yeah, once again, thank you for joining us for Edulastic 101. Let's dive right into things. Alrighty, so before I pass things off to Sean, we have just a few quick housekeeping things to go over. First, I just mentioned the chat. We invite you to use this throughout the duration of the training to collaborate with one another and add any insight. And with that, I invite you to type into the chat right now where you're tuning in from and what your role is in education. So I'll start. I'm tuning in from Truckee, California today. Alrighty, I see a principal, awesome. San Francisco, Utah, Philadelphia, math teacher, Greensville, Seattle, Washington. Lots of people are online today, great. Arizona, New Jersey, math teacher, Minnesota, instructional coach, welcome Ashley. Theodore is a special ed teacher, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for being here. And yeah, like I said, I invite you to use the chat throughout this entire training, get to know one another, add any insight you may have, that sort of thing. That brings me to my next point, which is about the Q&A bubble that's at the bottom of your screen. If you have an official question during today's training, please type that into the Q&A bubble. This helps us to stay organized with those questions, and it makes it so that Ileana and I can either type a response back to you, or we will get to them during our designated Q&A time at the end of the hour. So chat is for collaboration and conversation. Q&A bubble is for official questions. One other just quick housekeeping thing, I launched a poll a bit ago, and it looks like most people have taken it, but if everybody could please take that poll, that would be really helpful. This helps us get an understanding of who's here so that we can cater this training towards you. Looks like about 50% right now are brand new to Edulastic and 35% have used it for a few months. And it looks like about 38% have a free teacher account and 33% have a school or district premium account. Awesome, alrighty. So here's today's plan. This is our short little introduction. And in just a few minutes here, I will pass it over to my colleague, Sean Kendall. And he's gonna be talking for about 40, maybe 45 minutes and walking you through pretty much all there is to know about a free teacher account in Edulastic. He'll start with how to create that free teacher account on edulastic.com, how to create and administer a test in Edulastic, what it looks like when a student takes a test in Edulastic so that you can understand what your student sees so that you can help them and you know what they see on their end. We'll also go over the immediate data and the performance results that you can see in Edulastic. And then at the end, I will take you through the resource page and other places that you can go to get training and support when it comes to Edulastic. Like I said before, we will have a designated Q&A time at the end of this hour. So feel free to ask any questions you may have. We really want you to walk away today with all of your questions answered and with a comprehensive understanding of Edulastic. All right, Sean, go ahead and unmute yourself and take it away.
Fantastic. Gonna go ahead and share my screen here. All right, there we go. So we should be good to go. Let me know, should be able to see my screen here. I'm just gonna move my little bar out of the way so I can see everything. As Jan said, welcome everybody to today's training. Does look like we have a lot of kind of experienced users and some premium accounts in here as well. Today, we will be focusing on the, the free version of Edulastic, but it's still going to be a great session for those that, might be new to the premium accounts, because without the basics, those premium features will be difficult trying to understand how to utilize them until you, of course, understand how to create an assessment. And so that's what we're going to cover today, is make sure that you feel comfortable with all of the basics in Edulastic, so then we can start working on some of those more advanced features down the line. So the first thing we need to do today, and I'm going to jump into my edulastic.com web link over here. I'm doing it in my private browser, so I'm not signed into any accounts. with Edulastic, we're going to be looking at auto grading of 50+ question types to try and help you with those state tests that you have, especially those that are online. A lot of times those platforms that we might have used in the past only had, 4 or 5 question types, and then the state test have 13, 14 question types, and getting the students not only used to the content, but the ways to use online assessment platforms and to prepare them for that state test where they're going to see those variety of question types is going to be very helpful. And that's kind of what we do really well over here, as well as we have over 150,000 questions already in our bank of items. And then we also have assessments already created from various states and their state assessments. So we're going to have a lot of content already ready in there for you. So you are ready to go. All you have to do is sign up and start working in Edulastic. Now, over here on edulastic.com, we do have several tabs up here, and one of those is the resources tab. Jan is going to go over that a little bit later, but it's just important for you to know that it is available there on edulastic.com, so you have the ability to find help resources. Again, Jan will go over that a little bit later, and so we'll get into that after this Edulastic 101. Now I'm going to hop over into my getting started with Edulastic. You can do that by clicking the join for free button over here on the right side. Now I just already have it open, so it's nice and easy. I'm going to choose create your free account, and I'm going to choose as a teacher. Now, yes, you can choose as an administrator, but administrator accounts come with the enterprise or premium version of Edulastic. So if you choose I'm an administrator, it still signs you up as a teacher. It just gives us a little flag letting us know. But just understand that the administrator account is specific to premium or enterprise versions of Edulastic. So most likely you'll need to sign up as a teacher. Now, we do have a variety of ways to sign up as a teacher, whether you want to use one of the single sign-on options like Google, Office 365, or Clever, or you can just create your account from scratch down here, which is what I'm going to do. Now, this Clever sync here, just so you know, this is a Clever library sync. All that means is that your district is not sharing this information. It's going to basically allow you to manually sync. So just in case you use Clever and other platforms, you're probably used to an automatic sync. This sync is a manual sync, just like the Google Classroom sync that's available through Sign Up with Google. Now I'm going to go ahead and type in my name, Sean Kindle. I'm going to put in an email, and I'm just going to type and delete this. You can see I've done that 100 times here as I go through my different performances on the Edulastic 101. And I'm going to create another one, so it's nice and easy for us to know we need to delete those. I'm going to sign up as a teacher, and it's going to take me right into my dashboard. Now you'll notice that this little pop-up shows up, and this should show up for you if you're a first-time user, or if you've already signed up in the past but you've never really done anything. This pop-up might show up, and this is just our welcome to Edulastic pop-up. Now a lot of times you'll see these pop-ups kind of appear throughout the platform, and it's very important that you read them. Each pop-up is there for a designated reason. We found from feedback from our teachers and our customers that this was a good place to put a quick note for you to understand how to use those features. This one here being your training resources. So this Welcome to Edulastic is going to be helpful in giving you resources on training. Okay, now I'm just going to go ahead and close out of that. Also here on the dashboard, you'll find some more little clickable objects here, like the Edulastic overview, or accessing some things like Spark Math playlist or test library. A lot of different things here. Now, some of this is going to be premium content, like the Spark Math, and over here you'll see inspect. Some of that's going to be premium. So you'll just kind of have to click to find out what's available to you. Each one of these content bundles down here at the bottom, though, these are all free. Okay, so the certified, Edulastic certified is what that's called. The Engaged New York content, which many people are familiar with, and Edulastic's very own Smart Start diagnostic, designed to get you up and running in Edulastic, assigning an assessment to get a diagnostic test on your students right away in Edulastic. No need to create anything. So that's what those Smart Start diagnostics are created. And these Edulastic certifieds that I mentioned earlier, that's a collection in our content. And Edulastic certified are vetted content. Okay, so this vetted content includes your Department of Education released items. It includes things like Engaged New York and other assessment companies like Illustrative Mathematics. And it also includes our paid authors. So this is typically going to be your best content because this is the stuff, and I clicked on it, I apologize there. This is the stuff that is vetted. It's made sure, it's somebody that's supposed to be creating content. Now I'm just going to pause there. I just threw out a lot of information, so I'm just going to give you a second. If you're writing anything down, give you a little breather. Okay. All right. So with the dashboard, the whole point here when you first sign up is to try and get you into that content as quickly as possible. But with our content, we need to do a couple other things beyond just looking and assigning content. We need to be able to connect to our school and create classes. The classes are going to allow us to assign to. And that's how we get the students in there. That's how we assign it to the students, and then ultimately how they log in to access that assessment. Now, you'll notice right up here at the very top, we have the complete sign up process. That's where we're going to choose our school. Now, this is a very important part. And if you don't find your school, you might consider reaching out to Edulastic's support team using the chat icon down here. Joining your school is how you're going to be able to collaborate with your colleagues. So for example, if Jan and I were working on a 5th grade assessment together, we would need to be in the same Edulastic school so I can share my assessment at the school level and she can go and find it. Now, there are alternative ways to share assessments like link sharing, but assigning yourself to the correct school is going to help. I'm going to go ahead and join my school here. It's NYC School of Science, and there it is. All right, so my school came up. A tip here is to search by your district or your zip code if you're unable to find your school. Now I'm going to go ahead and proceed. This information is also very important for you to choose. And I know it's pop-ups. We don't like dealing with pop-ups. We just want to get in there and start working on Edulastic. But this stuff is going to be very important because you have 2 different standards-based reporting for free in Edulastic. And so by choosing the correct standard sets, you're saying you want the system to recognize that's what the data you want to look at. So I do highly suggest you take the time to fill out this information. I'm a 5th grade teacher. Maybe I'm also a 6th grade teacher. I teach only math. And I'll select my standard set and I'll just type in Common Core here just to be, quick and easy. Now I added Math Common Core. I could also type in, I need to type in Common Core again here, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of other standards, including California. We got DSST Common Core there. So you'll notice there's other standard sets in our system other than just Common Core. So if you're from New Jersey, there's New Jersey standards in there. From Louisiana, there's Louisiana standards in there. So you'll find a variety of standards in there. There's Florida, there's Georgia, Massachusetts, Kansas, all of those different standard sets are in there for you. In the off chance that your standards aren't in there, you can take that list of standards, if you find it on your Department of Education, send that over to support@edulastic.com. So support@edulastic.com, and we'll upload them for you. We want you to have your standards and to track your standards in our system. Okay. All right. So now I've connected myself to the correct school. If you are somebody that has used Edulastic in the past, and it does look like there's a lot of you, I just want to give you a little heads up. You have a profile by clicking on your initials at the bottom left and choosing My Profile. So if you're ever having issues with those standards, you do have the standard sets here that you can select your standard sets and make sure if you're also an ELA teacher, maybe you add in your ELA standards. But another good place is the schools section. When you go from one school year to the next in Edulastic, it doesn't ask you what that new school is if you've moved. And so you might come into this spot and recognize, oh, I switched schools last year and I did not update it in Edulastic. And there's the Add School button to change that. Just a little trick there in the My Profile tab. All right, so I'm going to go back to my dashboard. Now, we've connected our account to a school. We've chosen our standard sets, our grades, our subjects. The next thing we have to do is we need to create our classes. Now, there's a couple different ways to add classes. One is through the Sync with Google Classroom button here. Also, the Sync with Clever button if you've done the Clever single sign-on option. And you also have the New Class option here. So depending on which access you need, if you need Google Classroom, you can choose that. And if you just want to create a class from scratch, you can do so here. Google Classroom is a free option and it is very easy to use. A lot of my customers use Google Classroom even on the paid version. And Google Classroom allows you to assign assessments, sync in your roster directly from Google Classroom, and it'll do grade passback. So students go directly to Google Classroom and they can access their assessments there and their grades. So it just makes it really convenient. Also, one of the biggest things that's always a challenge for students is remembering login information. So if you're using Google Classroom, then you can use their Google information and it's one less username and password they have to remember. Now, I'm going to just choose New Class here. With New Class, I'm going to fill out the information. Go ahead and type in a name, Algebra 2. And I'm going to put in period, and let's put that in right there. You'll notice I've typed this in before. I like to have the subject, the period, and my last name correctly is best there. But I like to have these three pieces to it. It just makes it easier for you to know what class you're assigning to. It's easier to know which class to go look for the correct students. If you just put Algebra 2 for your 7 different periods, it's not going to be easy to know which one's which. I'm just going to leave my class start date and end date as is. You can change it if you need to using the little icon over here. Select my grade level, let's say 9th grade, and mathematics. You can also select your standard set. So again, I'm going to choose Common Core here. And finally, if you choose, you can tag your class. Now, tagging is more necessary for your admin if they were involved in an enterprise version, but you can feel free to add a tag if you want. This is more relevant again for admin trying to find your class. So if you're on the free version, No need to worry about that tags feature there. I'll go ahead and save. And now my class is created. Now I can add a co-teacher for free over here, and the co-teacher feature allows me to add somebody that works with me, maybe an intervention specialist, maybe a true co-teacher, somebody that's teaching in there with me. And this gives them access to my roster to be able to assign assessments, to look at the data, and to manage the roster with me. So this is a very helpful tool. All you have to do is click on it and type in their name or email here. Now they do need to have an account as well for this to work. So make sure they have an account before using that feature. You can add multiple students at once using this icon. And you can go into a CSV file or a spreadsheet and just copy and paste those usernames here, whether it's Google username or Office 365. That's a very helpful tool. And this also includes the single sign-on option of Google and Office 365. You don't need to use Google Classroom, so you can just use their emails here to include that single sign-on feature. Now you have the first name and last name options here. If your students don't have emails, I do recommend using these. Those are going to be your best options. But if your students do have emails, I highly, highly suggest you use the Google or Office 365. These two are by far the best methods, but these two are designed for those who do not have emails for students. So again, if you have emails, use Google or Office 365. If you do not have emails, use the bottom two options. Now I'll go ahead and just type in a username here, test1, and I'm just going to type in an email and yes, add to class. So you'll notice that student is now existing, they're in my class, and they are good to go. Now, you'll also notice at the top here is a sync with Google Classroom button. In this case, let's say I've started Google Classroom late, I'm now starting to use it. I can actually click this and sign into my Google account. I'm not going to do that now for sake of time, but you would sign into your account and you would be able to connect your Google Classroom to this particular class. That just gets your rosters up to date. And then you can click this button again at any point to resync your roster. Google Classroom is a manual sync, which means that if you're syncing with Google Classroom and you have a roster changeover on Google Classroom, you need to come back to Edulastic and click that button. So anytime you have a roster change, you need to click on the class and sync with Google Classroom. And last thing here on the Manage Class tab is the Actions feature. This is where you can remove students or reset passwords. Now, these two are not a big deal if you're a Google Classroom user because all of that information should be coming over from Google Classroom. But if you're typing them in manually, both of these are great options. It allows you to remove students from the class who are not supposed to be there anymore and reset passwords to make it easier for students to log in. Now, again, I'm going to pause here just for a second, give you some time to take a breath and write down any notes.
Yeah, and hey, Sean, can I interrupt you to ask a question?
Sure.
Awesome. Boleen asked in the chat, he had a new student join his class after he had already set up Edulastic with Google Classroom. He's wondering how you would give access to that new student. And I think you just touched on this a little bit, but this is a great time to answer that specifically.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is this sync with Google Classroom button, but how do we get to this class and to that sync button? You get to it by either starting on your dashboard and clicking the little Manage Class button here. I'm going to zoom in to make it a little clearer. Or you can click on the Manage Class tab over here in the gray navigation bar. Now, how do I know that's the Manage Class? You can click this little arrow to expand it out. I'll click on the class there, and you'll notice the Sync with Google Classroom button. So all I have to do is click that button there. And again, I can't show it because I'm not signed into my account, but you'd click on that and it would say sync, allowing you to resync that roster.
Great. Thank you for that clarification, Sean. And Philene says thank you as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, one other thing, since we are talking about Google Classroom here, before we move into the content side, one other thing that I do see that's fairly common is teachers try to, if I'm a co-teacher with Jan again, if I sync in the roster, Jan doesn't also have to sync in that same class. We'll be co-teachers on that Google Classroom, and it brings them into Edulastic as co-teachers automatically. So there's no need for both teachers to sync that roster. You do not need to do that. It will automatically bring over the co-teacher if you're a co-teacher in Google Classroom. Okay, so next piece here is the assessments, and I'm going to expand out my options here so you can see that gray navigation bar I was talking about. And we have the item bank and the test bank. Now, what's the difference between the two? The item bank has individual questions that you can use to create your own customized assessment. You can also create your own items in the item bank. The test bank is pre-made assessments. So those Department of Education released state tests, practice tests, those can be found here. Now, I like to start with the item bank because the item bank allows you to customize it to your needs. If you want 5 questions, you can add that. If you want 20 questions, you can add that. You can choose the standards you want, the subjects. You can vary it with multiple subjects on one test if you wanted to. So there's just a variety of ways for you to customize that assessment. Now, how do we find content? And I'm going to go ahead and just clear all of my filters here. You'll notice I have 298,000 items. That's a lot to scroll through. So how do I filter this down to make it easier? And that's the options over here on the left. The first 4 filters are the recommended ones at any point in time. So I'll go ahead and choose grade 5, mathematics, and I'll choose the standard set Common Core Mathematics. I'll now choose the standard that I want to use, and I'll click on the little green box, and I click that quickly. It's just this little green box right here. Brings up my standards, and I'll choose a standard. So 298,000, now I only have 375 for my particular standard that I want, and I'll apply. So now I'm able to apply, and I have 375 items to look at. Some of those being considered Edulastic certified. Remember, Edulastic certified is the vetted content. I can also look at only the vetted content and not the public bank being anybody from Edulastic adds content, and I can go to Edulastic certified right here. So 375, and now I have 136. Now with 136 questions here, you could consider some of these other filters, but just remember that the more filters you use, the less content you'll have. And so sometimes some of these filters are going to give you 0 questions, and you can always just click the X to exit out of those filters. Okay. Now, one of the things you might have noticed is I created a class that I called an 8th grade class, but I'm looking at 5th grade content. So just because at the beginning of your Edulastic creating an account or creating a class, just because you choose a different grade level, in 8th grade, for example, it doesn't mean you don't have access to other content or other subject areas. So you can always go and choose a different grade level if you feel like a different grade level is more appropriate for your students. Now, how do I easily look at this? Well, I'll just go ahead and click on this very first question here. All I know is which plot on the graph has coordinates of 1, 3, and it says image. Well, where's the rest of it? If I click on it, then I'll be able to see the full question. Here's the full question. I can decide if I like it, and if I do, add it to test. Then I can go to the next question in our list over here by clicking on the next arrow. And here's the next question. Now this one just wants me to plot a little point there, and I can choose to check answer to see if I was correct. It says I was incorrect, and show the answer to show me where the correct answer was. And I'd have to, oh, there we go. I had to scroll down just a tiny bit more, and there's the correct answer. Also, you can duplicate any question in our bank using the clone button right here. And this allows you to make little tiny edits, which generally are better for math because you just change a few numbers and you have a new question. But you can clone any question to make it your own. If you wanted to change the numbers, if you saw something that you wanted to add to it to make it easier for differentiation for your students, like adding a glossary term or something like that, you can always do so by cloning that question. Now I'll add a couple more questions to my test. And I have my test of 4 items now. You'll also notice the ability to create a new item right here. This is where you'll see the 50+ question types. So there's a ton of different question types available to you. They're all going to have a slightly different look and feel because they are different question types. But ultimately, the most important thing you need to know is that when you choose any particular question type, you follow the steps, you read down the page like a book, and then you move left to right. So this is first page 1, page 2, and page 3. It's always highly suggested you preview your work before saving the question. Previewing will save you a lot of time down the road if you found that the answer key was incorrect or there was a spelling mistake and your students are letting you know and you're wanting to change it. So setting up preview mode, taking the extra 5 seconds to show the answer, make sure your answer key is correct. That's going to cut down a lot of extra time in case there are any errors down the road. Metadata allows you to add your skills, and this is where your standards will be inserted. So math, Common Core, 5th grade, and browse for my standard. So edit it, preview it, and tag it to a standard. You would publish the question after that. In this case, I'm not going to publish. I just want to go back to our item bank, add back our questions, and create my new test. Now, I didn't show any other subjects. That's not because any of the other subjects are bad. I just happened to be a math teacher when I was a teacher several years ago. ELA's in there, which you're going to have passage-based. It is going to be the passage on the left with the questions over on the right, matching most state tests, the formatting that they have. And so it's just going to be a really nice way to get an idea of, what the students are going to see at the end of the year. Okay. Now, I've started my test. I've created a new test, and I have to enter in some information. Now, I'm going to call this perpendicular number line and just give it a name there. Now, it's important that you give a very, very good name here. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times we'll see, newer teachers, newer at Edulastic, more so, and you'll go in and you'll say, I just want to create a test for myself. I want something quick and easy. and then you call it Wednesday test. Now that sounds great, right? Wednesday test. Yeah, I know it's Wednesday. But what happens when there's a fire alarm and you don't give that test Wednesday and now you're giving it on Thursday? Your students are going to be thrown off, right? Same thing if you shared it with a colleague who saw your work and admired it and said, I really like what you're doing on Edulastic. Can you share your test with me? Well, again, you're sharing a Wednesday test. They're not going to want to wait until Wednesday to give that test. So just think about that test name. Give it a really good one to make it something where it's easy for teachers to find. They can use on any day, regardless of the situation. And then students also see that name, and so it's something that's relevant to them. Description is only seen by teachers, so you can choose to add that or not. That's an optional field. Now, we've already added our items, so I'm just going to move over into the review tab. I'm going to skip that, but you can always add more items if you felt that 4 was not enough. Now, on the review page here, I'll see all of the questions that I've added. I'll also see the standards that I've added, in this case, only 1. Now, this screen has a lot of great options for you, and this is where you want to put the finishing touches on your assessment. Okay, so I've found my questions, I've created questions, I've added them to my test. Now, one last check. Let's make sure everything looks good. We can expand our rows, and this will show us the entire question, the answer, and our answer key. Once again, double checking that we didn't have any mistakes within our question. You can also update the point value over here. If you had a 2-point question, or if you had a really difficult essay question, you can tag it to more points over here. Okay. More importantly is the View as Students button here. This gives you the opportunity to take the test as a student to get an idea of what they are doing. Now, it's very important that you go through this the first few times you give an Edulastic assessment. There's a lot of options over here on the student side, and you get to decide what's relevant to your students. And then, of course, you get to work with the student to make sure that they understand these different tools. Now you'll see a bookmark tool up here at the top, and that bookmark tool allows the student to mark it and then come back to it later when they get down to the summary screen at the end. You also have a scratchpad tool, and I'm skipping over the crossout tool. I believe this is a premium feature, but it's showing up anyway on my preview. So I'm just going to skip that and move to scratchpad. Scratchpad is showing up there, and that allows us to give the students the ability to show their work. The standard 2+2 question. I'll close out of that. And the magnifier, some really cool little features here. A lot of different options that you'll be able to help your students with, make sure they understand how to use the different features that are available on Edulastic. So a lot of different features here, as you can see. Now, ultimately, what happens is we'll get down to the end of the test. I'll just skip a few questions here and submit. And then you'll see the end screen, and this is what the students see. Question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, question 1 correct, question 1 incorrect, question 3 is correct, question 2 and 4 are skipped. So this is exactly what the students see. And you see something similar like this where you can see it at both the whole class level and the individual student level. Okay, now the settings are premium features, so we're going to go ahead and skip that as well. Over on the right side of that, you will notice the ability to print the assessment, share the assessment, and save it as draft. These three features here are all helpful before assigning the assessment. Now, if you're sharing the assessment and you want to share it out to your colleagues with the ability to just view and not actually edit your assessment, you'll also need to publish it first. And that's this little rocket ship icon here. So I'll zoom in just to make it a little easier to see those icons. So again, we have the print, we have the the sharing, saving as draft, and publishing. Let's go ahead and click on share just to see what that looks like. And again, I'm going to have these options grayed out because I have not published the assessment yet. But you have different options here, sharing it with your district, your school, because we chose that earlier, individuals by typing in their name here or email address. And the personal favorite of our users is the link sharing. So you're not having to type it in here. You just copy it, paste it in your Skype, your Slack, your email, whatever it is to work with your teachers. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and assign this assessment. Now, I'm not actually going to assign it today, but I'll choose my class and group section here. I only have one, but I can select multiple classes if I had multiple classes. I can select individual students, or if I'm just going to assign it to all, I don't need to click anything over here. I can just leave students blank and it will automatically assign to all. You have an open date and a close date, but I do want you to understand that going back to that situation earlier, you never know what's going on during the school day. We have fire alarms going off. 10 students were absent randomly. 5 students got sick. Especially with the situation going on right now, it's just not as easy to count on an assessment getting done today. And so with that in mind, try to consider leaving your close date open a week or possibly 2 weeks. As soon as the student submits the test, they don't have the option to go back and change things unless you personally give them that option to go back. Okay, so highly suggest sending that close date, a week, 2 weeks out. They cannot go back and retake the test unless you specifically give them permission in Edulastic. Now you do have two different test types here, class and practice. This is more just for filtering purposes. So when we go into our data, we can filter a little bit easier, but you do have the ability to also give a little different view with the practice assessment, making it a little easier, I guess, for students to work through the assessment in a less formal method. Don't forget to check out your couple of options available to you, how you want to release the scores, not release them at all, or release all of the information upon submission, and your evaluation method, whether you want to penalize, not penalize, not penalize, or send it back with you get it all correct or not correct at all. Generally, people leave it on the don't penalize for incorrect selection. This is the closest version of a true partial credit you'll have. This says that if a student is supposed to choose 2, they choose 1 correct answer, 1 incorrect, they get a 50%. So that's a true partial credit. The one downside to this, I do want to make note so you don't reach out to support saying there's a glitch, is because it's not penalizing, in the 0.001% chance that a student selects all of the options in a select all question, when you say to choose 2, it does give them 100. You can go in and manually rescore them at any point. If you do notice them doing that, very, very unlikely that they do, but just a heads up on that feature. And then once you do that, you would click the assign button. All right, so finishing up here, let's take a quick look at the data and what you get on the data side, and then we'll open it up for some questions. On the data side, you do have the assignments tab, and that is found through this little clipboard icon or battery icon. And you'll find the status and your assessments that you've given over here. And then you can click on the live classboard icon to view the live classboard. Now, all of this data is coming in live. So as a student chooses an answer, you get to see whether they're correct or incorrect. So this is all coming in live. Of course, this has already been done, so it's not going to show anything like that. You have your correctness guide up here, your little key that tells you what the different colors mean. And an underrated feature that people love once they figure out what it is this little wavy line, and that's the time spent per question. So you can get an understanding of, was the question really rigorous, or was it an essay question takes a lot longer than a multiple choice question? You kind of get those breakdowns. You can choose an individual question to get a breakdown of the student's answers on that particular question. So question 5 here is free student 5, free student 6, free student 7, and all of their answers. And again, the ability to manually rescore at any point. Now, going back to the card view, I can also click on an individual student to get their particular results on the test, including how long they took and their individual time spent per question. It is all categorized for you based on the response, based on the correctness of the responses. As I mentioned before, you do have access to a standards-based report, which you'll see right here. And that's where it was so important to make sure you chose the correct standards at the beginning, because then it'll break down the standards report for you, telling you on 7NS question 6, only 50% of the students have passed that particular assessment or that particular standard. Now, if there was anything on this live classboard that I told you you absolutely need to know, and there's always a few buttons that you can click, the more option, the 3 dots at the top, but the number one thing you have to know is this redirect button. This is how you give retakes and how you reopen it to students who did not take the assessment within the designated window. So if you do happen to assign an assessment for only one day and they don't get to it, you can redirect it to them to give them access to the test again the next day. Again, this is for retakes and reopening assessments. Last but not least, before we open it up for questions, is the Insights tab. In the Insights tab, most of these reports are going to be premium reports. But if I go to the standards gradebook, you'll notice no premium feature there. That's because this is a free report available for you to look at standards-based data across the entire school year. So this is a great report. The other report we were just looking at, standards-based data for that particular assessment. This gradebook shows us the data across the entire school year. This is a really nice report. You will notice, the colors are probably not as obvious to you. You'll see orange there, and orange you'll think is probably scary because it's close to red. But based on our coloring key up here, you'll notice the orange actually exceeds mastery. So orange is really good. Here's the students down here and the individual scores. So a lot of great features there. All right. All right. So that's my part for today. I did go slightly over time. I apologize. I get very excited when I talk about Edulastic, and I tend to go a little bit overboard. So I do apologize for going over the time, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen, give it back to
Sean,
Jan.
if you want to keep sharing, that's totally fine,
Okay,
actually.
sure.
Because then you can kind of demonstrate things as I ask these questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And yeah, your presentation was great. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
So our first question is from Deborah. She says, if you want to release correct answers and scores only after you review and finalize the scores, should you select do not release scores in the test settings?
That's correct. So the question here is, I want to give the assessment to the students. I don't want them to see anything until I've gone in to check it, graded, things like that. So you would say that release score settings is off. Then once you're done, you would find that assessment, go to the live class board, and you'll find that release scores button in the 3 dots. At that point, you can adjust your settings to release the scores.
Great. Thank you, Sean.
Absolutely.
Our next question is from Corinne, and she says, my district uses Clever for a SSO, and it automatically syncs with our SIS, which is PowerSchool. She has co-teachers already set up in PowerSchool. Do those co-teachers automatically sync with Edulastic?
The most important thing here to mention first is Clever at the district or school level is a premium or enterprise version. So if you're already doing that because you are an enterprise user, that's great. It's supposed to bring over those co-teachers, yes. And every once in a while there'll be some weird coding that in Clever that we need to adjust our system to make work for you. But those co-teachers should be coming over. That's correct. Again, you have to have the enterprise version of Edulastic to use Clever.
Thanks for that clarification, Sean. Hopefully that answers your question, Corinne. Our next question is from Jennifer Campbell, and she says, for ELA, can you filter by reading passages within the item bank?
Absolutely. And that's where, if I go back to my item bank here, that's where this question type filter works really well. And so again, item bank filters over here on the left, and we're using the question type filter. Now let me just jump over here to ELA. It'll take me 2 seconds to do this. ELA and Common Core. Choose a grade level that will have passages and passage with questions. And now I have all of my questions specifically with passages attached.
Awesome. Thank you. And Jennifer, hopefully that answers your question. Our next question is from another Jennifer. She says, if you share an assessment before it is published, can the people you share it with still see it?
If you share it before it's been published, there is a co-authoring feature that comes with the premium version. So at that point, yes, the teachers would be able to see it before it's published, but that is a co-author feature, which is premium. If you are a free version, they will not see the assessment until it is published.
Great, thank you. And maybe Ileana can share the help article about co-authoring in the chat. I know that's a pretty helpful one. Hopefully that helps, Jennifer. Next question is from Miguel. He's wondering, can I download scores onto a CSV from different classes on different assignments?
Absolutely. That's another great question here, and that's done through the assignments tab. Again, this is where we found our assessments and we found our data. You can click on the little live classboard icon of the assessment of the class that you want to download the results. And then in the more options, you'll see download grades and download responses. These download directly to a CSV file.
Great, thank you. Next question, Jennifer is wondering, she says, I noticed that you can start a Google Meet from Edulastic. How does this work?
Yeah, that Google Meets feature, it allows you to essentially start a Google Meet. Now, when you do that, you'll need to share the link from that Google Meet with your students through Google Classroom. That feature has not been used that much this year, so I do have to warn you, I think we might be moving that from that location, whether I think it's going to just go into manage class itself, but essentially you would click on that to start a Google Meet based on your Google account. and then you'd have to share that link with your students. So it does not create a meeting in advance. You would be creating it right now and then sharing the link with your students.
Thanks, Sean. Jennifer has a couple questions. First is, she says, after assigning a test, if you shared the test with another teacher, does it stay in the Shared with Me tab?
It does. It goes, whoever you've shared that assessment with, it goes into that Shared with Me. Now, specifically, it goes into the Shared with Me when the option, and let me go into Authored by Me here, when the option individual, I'm on the other account, apologize for that. It specifically goes to Shared with Me when, I got to clear all my filters here, when you choose the individual option here. This option is what puts it in the Shared with Me section.
Great, thanks for that. Jennifer's also wondering, if you select the Open Manually feature in the test settings, does this assignment need to be open before the students will be able to see it in their dashboard?
That is correct. Well, so it'll show up on the student's end. They just can't access the assessment. So that's a two-part question or answer there. If you assign it to the students, but you have it manually open, the students can see that it's coming soon, but they can't access it. So they're not going to see any of the questions or anything like that.
Great, thanks. Hopefully that helped, Jennifer. Linda has a good question here. She says, I've had instances where I designated a specific amount of time for the students to complete the test, but due to technology issues, Wi-Fi, etc., I wanted to give them more time. How do I allow individual students additional time when needed?
And that's that redirect feature that I mentioned earlier. Very important. The #1 article that's been read. I even have a YouTube video saved to my bookmarks because it's so common. But you go to your assignments tab, you click on the live class board, and it's this feature right here. That redirect will allow you to select individual students that need more time on that particular assessment, and then you can redirect it.
Great. And while you're on this page, Otalia is asking, how do I grade questions that require manual scoring, like an essay question, for example?
And the manual scored questions will show up blue, like our key up here. And you have a couple options. The easiest route will probably be to click on the individual question. Let's say this one needed to be manually graded, because that will show you all of the students' responses on one singular page. Then when you're looking at the question, you can move over to the right. You'll see the score over here in which you can update and provide feedback. Needed 2 responses and save. And you can go through the rest of the students and do the same.
Great. And I'll also add, earlier somebody asked where would that student work in the Scratchpad show up? And it would show up in this page.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then our final question before I take over screen share again, can you go over once again the different ways to sync grades to Google Classroom?
To sync grades with Google Classroom. I don't have a Google account to do that, to show that. But where you would do it is when you're in the live class board, you can sync the grades up here in the top right through this little blue icon. There'll be a sync with Google Classroom. And that would give you that option. Now it does send it back automatically, so you shouldn't have to worry about clicking that, but in the off chance it didn't do it automatically, you have the 3 dots and there's a sync with Google Classroom button there. I just don't have a Google Classroom to show that.
Great, thank you, Sean. And I know we also have a pretty helpful blog post about the different options with Google Classroom. So Ileana, if you don't mind sharing that. And Sean, I'm going to go ahead and take back over screen share so I can finish up here.
There you go.
Awesome. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right. So at the beginning, we promised that we'd go over just a few other Edulastic resources and other places that you can go to get support with Edulastic. So I wanted to point out our resource page. Sean touched on this earlier, but our teacher training hub / resource page is really great. There's other training recordings on here. Here's an Edulastic 101. Here's an Edulastic Teacher Premium. We also have self-paced training courses on this resource page. So if you're interested in learning more or diving a little bit deeper, I encourage you to check those out. At the bottom here, I wanted to point out our Quick Start Guide and our YouTube channel. Both this Quick Start Guide can actually be found on our YouTube channel, which I will show you right now. This is a really helpful place to go to get questions answered. Sean has actually created a ton of help videos that are anywhere from a minute to maybe 3 minutes in length and walk you through a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. So you can find videos on how to redirect, how to sync with Google Classroom, how to create a class, how to add students, lots of good stuff here. So I'd recommend checking out our Quick Start Guide, or if you have other specific questions, our Edulastic tutorial videos is a great place to go as well. All right, back to our presentation. Let me hit present, and I know we're almost out of time here. I also wanted to point out that we have several other trainings in the calendar. So tomorrow we have an Edulastic Teacher Premium training. That's at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're interested in learning more about what a Teacher Premium account can do for you and your students, I encourage you to come to that. And then into February, we have several trainings on the calendar that have to do with writing your own questions in Edulastic. In addition, we have several upcoming webinars. So these were just announced and they should be really great and really exciting. So we have Edulastic for Science, Edulastic for Social Studies, how to use Edulastic for RTI, so that's response to intervention, Edulastic for ELA, math, and math leaders. We have links that we can share to register for these. And then lastly, I just want to say thank you for joining us. We know this is a really busy time of year and we appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day.